Now we begin here with our big story. The renewed efforts underway to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. The group sent a delegation to Cairo today to take part in hostage and ceasefire deal negotiations. This is happening as Secretary of State Antony Blinken visits Saudi Arabia. This is his 7th trip to the Middle East since the start of this war. Blinken calling for a ceasefire, saying it's the best way to help everyone caught in the crossfire of the fighting.
The most effective way to address the humanitarian crisis in Gaza, to alleviate the suffering of children, women, and men, and to create space for a more just and durable solution is to get the ceasefire and the hostages home. But we're also not waiting on the ceasefire to take the necessary steps to meet the needs of civilians in Gaza.
Well, all of this happening as Hamas released a new video appearing to show an Israeli-American hostage, Keith Siegel, also an Israeli hostage, Omri Moran, his family speaking at a press conference in Tel Aviv earlier today with one simple message for the Israeli government.
Please bring Omri home now. Please bring all of them now.
Well, joining me now is Moshe Lavi, Omri's brother-in-law. Thank you so much for being with us. I know you're speaking with us from Tel Aviv today, and I'm wondering if you can just tell us, you know, what it was like when you first saw him appear in that video after all this time.
Yeah, thank you for having me tonight here in Israel and afternoon in the US. Saturday evening for us was a very emotional evening. We were scattered all around, to be honest, and we received the notification that a video came out showing Omri alive. And so we rushed back to where my family is displaced in southern Israel to be together as a family and process the news, process the video itself. We focused on the positive elements of the video, which is not the content which was dictated to Omri by Hamas terrorists. It's a psychological warfare and a war crime, but on the fact that he's alive. And it gave us hope, and it gave us the motivation to continue our advocacy work, to continue sharing our message to world leaders and to our own government here in Israel, that they have to do everything they can to bring them home, that they have to push for a negotiated deal to bring all the 133 hostages home, and that all levers need to be pulled in order to force Hamas into an agreement.
And do you think that an agreement will happen? As you watch all of this playing out, do you believe that a hostage deal can really go through after so many efforts that have been, failures?
Let's go back to the end of November, and we saw that a deal was implemented then. A deal was reached despite the difficulties, despite the fighting, despite the tragedy and the trauma we have from October 7 and the suffering on the other side in Gaza. And I think we can repeat that achievement of reaching a deal, of prioritizing the humanitarian cause of the hostages, of prioritizing giving some sort of hope to both Israelis and Palestinians, and ensuring that what happened on October 7 will not happen again. We have to reach this agreement, and yet despite the fact we were disappointed so many times over the past nearly 7 months, we have to keep the hope. We have to hold on to that hope that we can reach a negotiated agreement, because any other solution to bring home the hostages does not seem viable at this point. We may be able to rescue some hostages as we've done in February, but we won't be able to bring all the hostages home alive. So that's why we keep calling for a deal and keep calling the international community to pull all the levers to force the different sides to an agreement. We understand the Israeli government is going to be willing to make the painful concessions. We're now waiting for Hamas.
And as you note those painful concessions, it is something, a deal that the Secretary of State called extraordinary. So when you are talking about the international community here, do you have confidence in the United States and their efforts to help broker a hostage deal here? Do you think that the message is truly being taken seriously from people in your government as high up as Netanyahu?
We've been meeting people, the members of the war cabinet after Prime Minister Netanyahu, members of the government continuously. We have calls with them, and we do the same when we go abroad to meet elected officials. I'm normally based in New York. I worked there after graduating from business school, and so I've been in the Hill. I've been to the State Department, and I think there are people who are listening to us, decision makers who are listening to us and understand our plea everywhere, almost everywhere in the world. However, it needs to be clear that we have to ensure that Hamas is not emboldened by decisions made by Israel's allies, by decisions, strategic failures made by Israel itself, and is not emboldened as well by members of the international community who are unwilling to reject the radicalism it represents, one willing to condemn October 7th. And so I call all members of the international community to understand that we need to prioritize the hostage crisis, solving the hostage crisis, because that's the step that needs to be taken so that we could reach a peaceful resolution to the ongoing war we are witnessing now, nearly 7 months of suffering for both Israelis and for ordinary Palestinians, non-combatants, who are being sacrificed by Hamas for their genocidal ideology.
Moshe, thank you so much for spending some time with us today, and thank you for talking with us. And we look forward to speaking with you again in the future. And our thoughts and prayers are with you and your family at this time. I want to bring our big story, to our panel now. Joining us today is our ABC News contributor and op-ed columnist for the Los Angeles Times, LZ Granderson, along with ABC News contributor and Democratic strategist Christina Sinsoon Ramirez, ABC News contributor and editor of the National Review, Ramesh Ponnuru, and ABC News contributor and Sirius XM radio host, Mike Muse. Thank you all for being here with us. I know that you just listened to that emotional conversation. LZ, look, after the release of these hostage videos, there's a lot of people that think perhaps this shows that Hamas might be showing more willingness to agree to a ceasefire and a hostage release. What do you think?
First, my thoughts and prayers are with all the families whose victims are being held. It's 200 days, and I got a little choked up listening to that, Kana, because I think sometimes we get so caught up into the spectacle of the protests on campus that we forget that there are families that have been suffering for months and they're begging for their loved ones to come home. So I thank you for that interview. As far as the hope, if you will, if there isn't a ceasefire and Israel continues on its mission as it's currently headed, that means it's planning on going to Rafah. And that's where more civilians were told to go for shelter to begin with, which means we're going to see even more suffering of women and children and innocent civilians. And so, there's much hope. There's 18 countries, including the United States, that are hoping that Hamas takes this deal, and, thoughts and prayers. Let's just hope that they do.
And so for more on that, Ramesh, to you, what is your reaction to the fact that a source familiar with that call between Biden and Netanyahu over the weekend, the source said that 75% of this call was spent, talking about a hostage deal, and now the onus is on Hamas to take the deal?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's appropriate. I think that is where the onus has always really belonged, especially insofar as there was a ceasefire in effect that Hamas broke on October 7th. You can really feel the anguish of the relatives who want to have their loved ones back and to have them and know that they're safe. But the number one obstacle to that is what it's always been, which is Hamas.
And Hamas broke the second ceasefire deal as well. And so, Christina, to you, we know that Biden again spoke to Netanyahu over the weekend. He also continued to reaffirm the U.S., quote, ironclad commitment to Israel's self-defense. So how does his critical progressive voting bloc react to that kind of thing?
Yeah, I mean, it's been 7 months of a real political crisis, humanitarian crisis, not on October 7th, and for the hostages that are still being held, and 33,000 plus Palestinians that have killed, tens of thousands that have been injured, and now on the brink of starvation. I think that we're seeing added pressure with these conversations. Just today, the New York Times was reporting that the International Criminal Court is possibly issuing arrest warrants for members of the Israeli government for especially the lack of aid, the lack of food, critical care that has been getting in. So I think we're going to continue to see fracturing like we're seeing with the student protests. But overall, the Democratic base that Biden needs to get reelected do not support the current handling of the ceasefire, not just with young people, but overall the Democratic coalition.
And they're also considering arrest warrants for Hamas as well in that. And so, Mike, to you, we know also in terms of regional stability, right? We know that Secretary of State Antony Blinken is discussing normalizing relationships between Israel and Saudi Arabia, specifically meeting with the Saudi Crown Prince today. So, Mike, how do you see that impacting now the conflict between Israel and Hamas?
I see that having a possible positive outcome as Saudi Arabia could put pressure on Hamas to abide by these possible negotiated terms, as Saudi Arabia and other Gulf states could be the source of economic income for the Palestinian people, but also to Kana, as we look ahead into the day after all the hostages are returned, hopefully, and there is a permanent ceasefire, we have to begin to think about how do we build the infrastructure of rebuilding Gaza. And Saudi Arabia could be a big player within that dynamic. And so I think applying that economic pressure and economic data point to the conversation, hopefully could help advance that. And Secretary Blinken has been very, very steadfast on this shuttle diplomacy.
He certainly has. All right, LZ, Christina, Ramesh, and Mike, thank you to all of you.